Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to share with you our experience with different heating sources for your brooder, specifically the heating plate as well as the heating lamp. I actually got two different lamps or bulbs here to talk about. Obviously, heat and temperature control is super important in the first few weeks of your chicks, goslings or ducklings' life. They need to be kept warm. We're actually in our brooder right now. We are in our chicken tractor, so they're only here during the day. At night they're in the brooder. But we've been using both types of heating sources for the last two batches of our chicks, and we are gravitating towards the heating plate for a couple of reasons that I'd like to talk about in this video. But before we get started, make sure you subscribe. You click on the little alert button so you get notified when we publish more videos like this. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the heating lamp first. Heating lamps are fairly inexpensive and you can find them almost anywhere. Any farm supply store, even at PetSmart, you can find heating lamps. In fact, this guy here, we bought at PetSmart. That's one of the advantages. Fairly low cost of entry, wide availability. The main issue, as far as I'm concerned, with heating lamps is that they get really, really hot and so they can pose a fire hazard. So depending on the type of bulb you use, we have here, I think, a 250 watt bulb in there, in both actually, and they get super, super hot. So if they are not secured properly and they fall into the brooder, they can set everything on fire. And especially if the brooder is in your house, then you not only risk the life of your chicks or livestock in general, and the brooder, but also your entire home. So this is really one of the major concerns that we've had, and that actually gave me a couple of sleepless nights in the beginning when we weren't sure if we had secured everything properly. The second issue that we have found, particularly with the heating lamps, was the securing them to the brooder, because our brooder is typically covered. We have a lid on it with a mesh wire, so it's obviously breathable, but it's still a cover to prevent cats, other pets, or rodents at night, or snakes. We have our brooder in the garage this year from getting into the brooder. And so by covering or by having a lid on the brooder, that practically prevents you from clamping it to the side of the brooder wall, which in many cases, depending on the height of your brooder, is the ideal distance between the lamp or the bulb and the bottom of the brooder to, keep the right temperature, 95 degrees in the first few days of the chick's life. And so by not being able to have it clamped to the sidewall, we have to, suspend it. But then the problem is if it's too close to the lid, to the mesh wire, that might heat it up. It's, wire is obviously not gonna burn, but I still don't want anything that could potentially get super, super hot, above 100 degrees, to be too close to the heat source. And so from that perspective, we started moving away from heating lamps. The other disadvantage is, especially if you use a red light bulb like we have in here, that having that on 24/7 practically disrupts the circadian rhythm of your chicks, because naturally at night it's dark, there is no light. And so we actually purchased an infrared light bulb that emits heat without any of the visible light. And so I would argue that's better at night, but then you have to invest in two heating sources. And you either have to replace the bulb at night, which is inconvenient. Depending on the size of your setup that you have to either, hang both side by side, which would be ideal, and then just turn one off at the evening, turn the other one on, or put them on a timer, even better, or replace them, unhook them and put the other one in. In our environment, we didn't really have a good suspension system, and because of the lid that I mentioned before, it turned out to be super inconvenient to replace the lamps, and so we ultimately went with heating plates. They are more expensive for the initial investment, but they also consume significantly less energy. So for example, this one is, I think, a 25 watt heating plate versus the 250 bulb. So there's a tenfold difference, which is not a whole lot of money if you have it on for a couple of weeks. But depending on, if you're on a budget or not, it can add up. On the other hand, this is more expensive to start with. So if you only do this once in your life, then probably the heating lamp provides a better return on your investment. Also, if you have a lot of brooding space, if you're raising hundreds of chicks maybe, then this is certainly the more economical solution than having a ton of those heating plates which can add up fairly quickly. What I really like about the heating plate though is that it never gets super hot. It gets warm, but it radiates heat. So it's never super hot. You can always touch it. Even it's been on now for a while and I can still touch it. Yes, it's hot, but it's not so hot that it would set stuff on fire. And you can also adjust it with those legs, so you can lower it down, raise it up a little bit. In the beginning, you know, we raised and lowered it. A lot of times we can, you know, even set it up at an angle so that, you know, the birds can retreat further to the back and get maybe a little bit warmer. But we have actually found if you have a decent flock size, like ours, we have 27 birds in total, 25 chicks and 2 goslings. They huddle up, and so we just keep it at the very same height, you know, for the first few weeks. To be quite honest, I mean, I'm not sure how much you can see here in the camera, but they're all over the place. They seem to be perfectly fine. We have now 23 degrees Celsius, or I guess that's maybe close to 80s here in Georgia, and they don't seem to be needing the heating plate much. They're just roaming around and they're perfectly happy just scratching and doing their thing. But just from a fire hazard perspective, I sleep much better at night knowing that the heating plate cannot set anything on fire. They can huddle up. There is no light, so we don't disrupt the circadian rhythm. Of course, that means during the day we need to keep the lights on or have them outside where they're exposed to sunlight. If they would be in a dark garage, then we would have the exact opposite effect of, you know, having this lamp on 24/7. They would be always in the dark, not great either. With the heating plate, we just keep the lights on, open the garage door, and then at night it's dark. And they can go underneath. It kind of mimics the natural behavior now of the hen, where they can go underneath something and feel warm and secure. And they seem to be really liking that. They all sleep together, both the goslings and the chicks underneath, and they seem to be perfectly fine. The other consideration, that really doesn't really relate to which option you pick, but regardless of what option you pick, I would also recommend to have some sort of backup power, especially if you have your brooder somewhere outside, and if it's in colder climates where, you know, the ambient temperature can drop to levels that would not be conducive to the chick's health. I recommend having like an uninterruptible power supply that you plug those devices in case your power goes out in the middle of the night. Your chicks are still gonna be warm and safe. We've had it a couple of times in the past, and so we always use an uninterruptible power supply. Now we have solar panels with battery backup, so that takes care of that issue. Beyond that, again, depending on your budget, depending on your desire to take potential risk, to your mounting options maybe. You know, I really like the heating plates, less of a fire hazard. Yes, it costs a little bit more in the beginning. We don't have huge flock sizes or huge brooders. We raise, you know, at max 27 birds or so. They all fit underneath. They are available in different sizes. If you have a smaller flock size, you can get a smaller heating plate. It pays off over time. If you use it for a couple of years, you earn your initial investment back by consuming less power. The heating lamps, obviously very easy to obtain, widely available, fairly inexpensive. You can find replacement bulbs and even, you know, the lamps here at any farm supply store or even at PetSmart or maybe even at Walmart, I don't know. Just make sure they are mounted securely and properly. I always recommend, instead of just using the brace here or only using the brace, to also leverage that extra hook if your lamp comes with one. This one does. This one didn't, so I'm not too fond of this one actually, because if something loosens up here and that stuff falls down, you don't want to, you know, set your house on fire. With that, we're gonna wrap it up. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, let us know in the comments what they could have done better. Until next time.